Ambassador Shamsaram, is there any chance you might be coming to Bangalore?
Not in the near future, sir, but I keep going once in a while. So
please, next time you come, do let us know.
I will certainly do so.
Yeah, there are many IFS colleagues here. I'd love to.
I know. Yes.
And Eric Gonsalves is the senior most among them.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's attending this particular webinar.
Oh, okay.
That's and I had a message from Ambassador, our dear revered former Foreign Secretary Rasgotra this morning. He's 97 now.
Yes.
Yeah, and he said, unfortunately, he is unable to attend this because apparently suffering from a bad cold and cough.
Ah, okay.
But he has sent like a message, which I will read out later in this.
Certainly. Okay.
You want to see Rasgotra's?
Should you wait?
Yeah, I don't know. Shall I start and meanwhile Mr. Jaikumar can join? Because he's going to moderate the session.
It's all right if he is delayed, then I can moderate the thing until he takes over.
Right, sir. Shall we start then? Shall we go?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Yeah. Sandeep, just give the signal and I'll do.
You have contacted his office, Dr. Usha?
Yeah. He's already online, but he has just sent message. 3 minutes he will come join.
Oh, then let's wait for him.
Okay.
If he has confirmed that he is going to be joining in a few minutes' time.
Yeah, he's already online. Somebody has put him online and he's actually coming out of the class. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. Sorry, I was giving a talk.
No. So you will be starting directly, or you want?
No. I think we'll go as per the program. Shamsaran sir is there.
But then somebody has to introduce him. So shall I invite you, or
No, please
start?
Please, Ushaman, please feel free to introduce all of us.
Okay, all right. Sandeep, please put us some. Yeah. Okay.
No, don't.
Okay. A very good afternoon on behalf of India International Center and the Poetry Society of India. We are presenting this evening's webinar on Introspections by Seema Nazareth. And we're very fortunate to have a very distinguished panel of speakers who have joined us this evening. We have with us Ambassador Shamsaran, President, India International Center, and former Foreign Secretary, Government of India, who is going to chair this session. President Saran he's also a senior fellow and member of the governing board at Center for Policy Research. And after leaving government service in 2010, he has headed the Research and Information System for Developing Countries, a prestigious think tank focusing on economic issues. He was also chairman of the National Security Advisory Board under the National Security Council during 2013 to 15. Welcome, sir. We have President Saran is going to chair this session. We have also with us Shri K. Jayakumar, who is President, Poetry Society of India and former Chief Secretary, Government of Kerala, who is going to moderate this session. Shri Jayakumar, besides being the President of the Poetry Society of India, is a poet, lyricist, screenwriter, and painter. He has written lyrics for nearly 100 Malayalam films and large number of songs for albums, television, and radio. He has authored 24 works in Malayalam and 4 works in English. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
We have with us Professor Radha Chakrabarti. She's a writer, critic, and translator, Professor of Comparative Literature and Translation Studies at Ambedkar University, Delhi. She has translated several of Tagore's works, including Gora, Boyhood Days, Chokar Bali, Farewell Song, Shishir Kabita, and The Land of Gods, stories, poems, and plays for children. Welcome, Professor Radha. We have with us Sri Gopal Krishnan Katur, who's a poet and editor, Poetry Chain Journal. He's an award-winning poet. His poetry has appeared in major poetry magazines in India and outside. He has been represented in international poetry anthologies on contemporary Indian poetry in English. Welcome, sir. We have with us Ambassador Pascal Alan Nazareth, who's a writer and former diplomat. Ambassador Nazareth has served in India's diplomatic missions in Tokyo, Rangoon, Lima, and London. And before his first ambassadorial appointment in 1979 as High Commissioner of the Ambassador of India to Ghana, Liberia, and Togo, and subsequently Consul General of India in New York and Ambassador of India to Egypt and Mexico. He's also proud father of Seema Nazareth. Now, with this brief introduction, I would like to invite Sri Jayakumar to moderate the session. Over to you, sir.
Moderation should be moderate. So I should request Ambassador Shyam sir to open his opening remarks as the chairperson of the session. I shall talk later.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shri Jayakumarji. First of all, let me add my words of welcome to my senior colleague, Ambassador Alan Nazareth, and also the father of Seema Nazareth, whose life we are celebrating this afternoon. Also, moderator Shri Jayakumarji, President of the Poetry Society of India and former Chief Secretary of the Government of Kerala. Professor Radha Chakrabarti, Shri Gopal Krishnan Katur, who's poet and editor of Poetry Chain, and all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, who are joining us on this webinar this afternoon. As I said, we are really gathered here to celebrate a most precious life of a beloved daughter, a most talented young woman and gifted poet, Seema Nazareth. Though she left for her heavenly abode at a very young and tender age, she lived an extraordinarily rich and eventful life, accompanying her parents to many exciting countries. She took to poetry at a very early age and grew and matured as a poet in the ensuing years. We are grateful to her proud father, Ambassador Alan Nazareth, for bringing 72 of her handwritten poems together in this fine volume entitled Introspections, which is being released this afternoon. This is a gesture of love, but also of homage to a most talented young woman whose loss has been profoundly felt. Introspections are poems which are extraordinary in range of subjects they address and the sensibilities that they display. Some of the poems reflect an unexpected profundity of thought. Others are odes of joy and wonderment. The title Introspections is particularly appropriate because the poems are meditative, or looking within. Seema captures the quintessential meaning of existence, for example, in the following words, and I quote, "Life is always a conscious quest for balance, finding equilibrium between the desire for dynamism and the need for peace of heart, unquote. This is a reflection that would find almost universal resonance. Introspection delivers on the hope that Seema has of her poetry. She says in one of the poems that perhaps my mark will be only in the hearts of others, but what better place to be, as long as goodness, faith, and energy and laughter fill my days, unquote. In the echoes of those refined sentiments, Seema has indeed found her mark in the hearts of others, those who will read and savor her lovely words. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to Shri Jayakumarji.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the appropriate opening remarks. I should say that it's a matter of great honor to be part of this program. Although IIC often organizes programs like programs on poetry, poetry reading and poetry discussion, book discussions, this is no such ordinary function. This is a very special program, special for several reasons. Special because we are remembering a very special person, a special poet. But more so, this program celebrates the fact that how lucky she had been to get to be born to a father like Pascal Alan Nazareth, who had very assiduously, with enormous amount of affection and care, has designed this program, has brought out this book as his great act of love. So Seema, although her life was very brief of 24 years, is a very blessed child to have been born to a father like him. And he's lucky in a way, although it's cruel to say that he's lucky because he lost his dear daughter at the age of 24, but he's lucky to have a daughter like Seema, who lived a lustrous life in her brief period of 24 years. I do not want to read poems after poems and sort of take away the concentration and intensity of this program. But her poems are so special, are so honest, not at all strained. They comes from some invisible fount within, invisible fount from within her. She could not but have written these lines when she was exposed to so many realities and landscapes and situations in life. There is, as I said, there is a lustrous quality about her poems. Those lines and those metaphors, those words come out from some unknown source, from some unknown depth. I don't think many of these expressions are the products of deliberate choices. Like great poets, in the moments of creative intensity, they really do not know how these words came about. Like a great performer on stage, like a musician on the stage, the most outstanding performances of such musicians, most of the time they will say that, oh, did I sing that? Don't sing it. Did I sing like that? I don't remember. Because they are not self-aware at such creatively intense moments. The art takes over and induces its own dynamism, creating new patterns and new forms of beauty, which you are consciously not really aware. That is a hallmark of great art. You are self-unconscious. You are not self-conscious about what you are doing at that time. It is not your conscious mind that is guiding you. I think Seema's creativity speaks about that kind of brilliant moments where your conscious mind is subdued and your subconscious mind of startling creativity takes over, creating this kind of beautiful poems. I'm sure she herself must have been bewildered when she read them after she completed them. She had luminous moments where her impressions and her ideas sort of formed into poetry, into poems. The one point I would like to make, and I think she also had notions about the brevity of life. Many of the poems would suggest that happens because creativity takes you closer to the source of divine creativity. After all, creativity itself is divine because the divine creator, whatever name you use, is the biggest creator, he is the ultimate creator. So creativity is about godliness. And when you have that kind of intense spells of creativity, you become prophetic. You see into the life of things, as Wordsworth would say. We see into the life of things. Likewise, she also had glimpses into things which she did not know consciously. Now, I think that speaks about her life, an intense life, an intensely creative life. The intensity of these poems foretell that she has her entire life energy of, say, 70 years or so, or 80 years, condensed into a few years of biological life. I don't know how that happens, but it is that gives her the creative intensity. A person of less than 24 years has written such beautiful poetry, such thoughtful poetry, such insightful poetry, using very unpretentious words and images. Words and idioms, unpretentious. They come naturally, as kids would say, as naturally as leaves to a tree. What is the ultimate idea or ultimate feeling that comes out of these poems? The poet's sense of gratitude, the poet's sense of fulfillment, the poet's sense of comfort with existence. She is comfortable with existence. She is joyful about existence. She is indebted to existence. And all this intensity, this joyfulness, she condenses into these poems in the small biological span of life she enjoyed. But I think creativity never dies. Poets are immortal. I think Seema Nazareth is an immortal person because her creativity has, even while she was alive, has taken her to the proximity of God, if I may say so, to the great creator. So there is a spark of divinity in her poems. Divinity has manifested in its simplicity and directness, unblemished directness. And there is a sense of purity. And she longs for all good things of life, all things beautiful in life, because she intuitively realizes that beauty is truth. So these poems are also a homage to truth, a search after truth. It is her experience of truth and beauty that she has condensed into these wonderful poems. I do not want to waste time on reading these poems, but I cannot resist the temptation of reading one poem, a small poem. Why did God create me? The second poem. Why did God create me? He created me because he wanted me, Seema Nazareth, to be on this earth and make others happy. He did not have to create me. He wanted to. That makes me feel special. I think you are special, not only to your family, to your father and mother and others, but to all of us who got involved in your poetic journey thanks to this wonderful program. I pray for her eternal existence. I pray for her peace. I thank her father, proud father, for organizing a very touching, befitting program like this. I wish we were able to meet, not online, but offline. That would have given a special dimension to this program. But then this is also good because larger number of people could cooperate in this program. Thank you very much, IIC, for hosting this program. And with these few words, I will close my introductory remarks as the moderator of this program. And I think we should move on to Professor Radha Chakraborty, who, being an academic, would be able to enlighten us more on the quality and the depth of Seema's poetry. On to you, Professor Chakraborty.
Beautiful words. Yes, man. I love this woman.
Professor Chakraborty.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to the Indian
You are muted. Yeah.
No, but I can hear. We can hear you. I could hear. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can't hear her.
Or is it?
But my
Yes. Okay.
We can hear you now.
Okay, go ahead.
okay. Is this all right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to begin by thanking the India International Center and Ambassador Nazareth for inviting me to speak here about this book, this very special book. And I'm also very grateful to the Poetry Society of India. The book, I think we need to see. I'm holding this up so that those who are participants in the program can see the smiling face of the poet behind the words that we'll be talking about. It was a very special experience reading this book. And I will just speak from the heart about my experience of encountering these poems. And I will from time to time read fragments from these poems to give our listeners a feel of how they read and how they sound, because they really come alive, I think, when we read them aloud. So reading Seema Nazareth's poems, I try to conjure up a mental image of the person whose voice speaks through the lines. I never met Seema, but after reading her poetry, I feel her living presence in these lines, and my mind fills with questions. What kind of person was she? How did she see and experience the world? What moved her to write poetry with such passion? The title Introspections perhaps gives us a clue. For the poems reveal a mind given to reflection and self-scrutiny. Seema, I feel from reading the poems, was a private person who formed deep attachments and responded to experience with a special sensitivity. We can sense this even from the names of some of the poems, such as Self-Assessment, Love-Hate Relationship with Work, 100 Years of Solitude, Stocking Up Little Fantasies, My Voice Wants to Burst Forth, I Long for Kind Words and Warm Hugs, Why Did God Create Me, A Jumble of Memories, and Time Deliberately Stored for Myself. These are just some examples. The poems trace her evolution from a schoolgirl to a young woman making her life as a professional in the big city. Along with her inner world, the poems also bring to life concrete, tangible experiences that make up her reality. Instead of confining herself to conventionally beautiful motifs, she often finds poetic potential in the humdrum and the mundane. In the poem called If I Make a Documentary, she says, for example, if I made a documentary, it would be about an old pair of shoes. Like Van Gogh, I think that there is beauty in everyday things. We see this approach in poems like The Smell of Rain, Breakfast on the Front Veranda, and A Gorgeously Sunny Sunday Morning. Even as she draws on seemingly ordinary raw material, Seema asserts the transformative power of the creative imagination. And I'm quoting a few lines here from a poem called If I Could Make a Magical Design. I'm making my design on a delicate porcelain vase. In it are my dreams of wondrous things. The magic of my fantasy is the silk thread being woven into its design. In another poem called If I Was a Sculptor, she says, my sculpture is a gateway from reality to imagination. In Seema's vision, art and nature go together. In the same poem, If I Was a Sculptor, she says, nature and me working together, glass from her sands, marble from her crust, rainbow pigments from plants, and light from the sun. As a diplomat's daughter, Seema traveled the world, and it is clear that she developed a cosmopolitan outlook. In The Nomad's Life, she declares, I feel like a mosaic with fragments of various pasts pasted in spiraling designs. She also expresses a desire for the building of human connections across borders that divide the world. She says, thank you, Lord, for the means to reach out across borders and discover the humanity and uniqueness of cultures. Help me to be part of the bonding forces which will bring our beautiful globe to its inhabitants even closer in caring for each other. And this is from the poem called The Humanity and Uniqueness of Cultures. These lines were composed in 1997, a quarter of a century ago. But in our present world, driven by hatred and war, they resonate with even greater urgency. Even when speaking of external spaces, though, Seema's poems are actually mindscapes, mapping emotional geographies and the terrain of the inner psyche. After speaking of the hustle and bustle of Mumbai life, for instance, she says, God, help me to find spaces of solace and times of peace. I long for serenity. So we can see the thematic complexities of her writing, but we also, I think, need to note the striking stylistic sophistication that comes across. Because Seema seems to think in metaphor. She says, the pregnant sky breaks its waters, trickle down the air, and it feels like rebirth into a world of warm, wet smells. In another poem called Envy Creeps, she resorts to vivid similes. Envy creeps stealthily, darting like the smooth-bellied lizard on the wire mesh. The craving to ingest chunks of knowledge like a bloated python. Elsewhere, in the short poem called Rain, she engages in wordplay. So she says, rain, rains, rainless. And each time the word rain is spelled differently and carries a different meaning. And yet the poems are not art for art's sake. They also reveal a powerful sense of purpose in life, the will to make a difference. Seema asserts her determination to become a journalist, a seeker after the truth with a mission to save the world. She says, I am a journalist in shining armor, and these are the days of brave knights. I am armed with my curiosity, and my quill is ready. In another poem, she imagines herself a miracle maker who reconnects the human world with the life force of nature. And she sets this poem in Africa. To the African jungle, I will bring rain, she says. I will bring rain so that the trees may lift their branches and flowers, may whisper their secrets again. The people watch and wait anxiously. Then I stop and put my ear to the ground. I hear the magic traveling upward. Suddenly, a joyous shout, and then the first drop of rain falls. Composed 30 years ago, Seema's poem anticipates our current anxiety about climate change, the endangered planet, and the need to restore our connection with nature. One is struck by the maturity of some of these poems. composed by a girl at the threshold of her life. Not for nothing does Keki and Daruwala remark, and I quote, "There is a wise head above Seema's young shoulders." There is a constant awareness of the passage of time in poems such as Time Presses On Impatiently, Warm Memories, and As I Look Back. Along with her love of life, the poems also reveal a sharp awareness of death and the transience of life. She says, almost as if she had a premonition, "I listen to the tales the Nile tells, while it flows swiftly by. I know that one day I will be part of its eternity, my soul embedded in its waters." In Seema's poems, we feel her absence as much as her presence. Perhaps the pandemic has sharpened our collective awareness of the precariousness of human lives and the omnipresence of death and sudden loss. Coming as it does on the heels of the COVID experience, the publication of this volume has happened at a timely moment, for the poems remind us of the spirit of survival, of the persistence of hope, love, and human dreams, even in a season of losses. In a haunting poem, Seema writes, and I quote, "I dream of making a mark before I die, but not in the old way. Perhaps my mark will be in only the hearts of others, but what better place to be?" Indeed, Seema Nazareth lives on through her words that she wrote and the spirit behind them. I'm grateful to her family for sharing her poems with us through the publication of this book. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Radha Chakravarti. True to your style, your presentation was inimitable, and that has given the totally different dimension to our evening discussions. We'll now move on to an eminent poet and my good friend, Sri Gopi Krishnan Kotur, who has spent a whole lifetime writing poetry and publishing poetry and promoting poetry. I think he lives in poetry, he breathes poetry. So we will have Gopi Krishnan Kotur. We will listen to him talking about Seema Nazareth's poems. On to you, Gopi Krishnan.
So much. Honorable Ambassador Sri Shyam Saran, President, India International Center, Sri K. Jayakumar IAS, President, Poetry Society, India, Professor Radha Chakravarti, Honorable Ambassador Sri Pascal Alan Nazareth, father of the poet Seema Nazareth, and distinguished members and lovers of Seema's poetry in the audience. I have this beautiful book, Introspections, before me, with a picture of a dazzling, smiling Seema Nazareth, whose very face seems the epitome of ethereal poetry, something beautiful for God. I can see that this is a book of love of a father for his beloved daughter. So much of a father's love has gone into every page of this book. And I see a book of love of Seema for poetry, for nature, for the senses, for colors, for peace, for humanity, and for God. These are the young poet's traverses. Seema's journey, a race for creative perfection, is almost akin to that of the poet John Keats, who felt he would not make it among the great poets if he is not given time, but he was all along aware and with fears that he may cease to be before his pen had reached his steaming brain. Looking at the calm, serene face of poet Seema Nazareth on the cover of the book, and after a reading of the poems, I can't help wonder how close Seema is to Anne Frank, both in terms of her love for nature, belief in the goodness of humanity, and for a steadfast faith in the peace of the universe and the will of God. Seema, in many ways, is beyond her time and beyond boundaries, as her name suggests. You may think that I am praising the young poet, but I'm not. Often, Seema's poems, her ideas, her lines remind of a freshness of her Keats, in the early quest of his art, perhaps a John Clare or a Rupert Brooke. Interestingly, Seema's is a quest for perfection of her craft, which is devotedly poetry. Seema is totally committed to her poetry. This is the most admirable part. Suffused with the energy and wonderment of the senses, love of nature, its colors, events, and fragrances, Seema's is a poetic soul abundantly gifted. And so much more with the promise of that gift being gently unraveled as revealed in the poems in this collection. Seema wakes to the earth and to its voices as an Alice in Wonderland, dipping and soaking herself in words, taking its freshness in ways that surprise and enthuse us into reading page after page of her intensely admirable and enjoyable poetry. Seema's truly is a voice that should reverberate among young minds. I believe that the poetry of innocence, with their quest for beauty and truth and peace of humanity, should find a place in school textbooks, for that is where we live. For they will be an inspiration for many an aspiring poetic talent waiting in the wings like Seema herself. The sparkle of innocence and quest with words to unravel the wonders of creation is sublime and wondrous. The praise of the grandeur of God, beauty, the earth, and the eternal often reminds me of the mind of Gerard Manley Hopkins. For those of you who perhaps doubt me, hear these lines, I quote, "Dear Lord, valuable things don't come easy. I feel the sculpture chiseling away at me as I continue through my orbit." These are intense, profound lines of irresistible poetry of a young girl, hardly 20. Seema, with her poetry, becomes an ambassador of God on earth. It becomes her duty to praise his gifts and accept them with marvel, unflinching trust, and faith. Seema the poet can rise above the children of her age, and like Anne Frank, I quote, seeks that solace in the gifts of sight and sound and friendship, remembering always that these bonds are the essence of human existence. While her poetry is a guide to help others, I quote again, finding the equilibrium between the desire for dynamism and the need for the peace of the heart. The peace of the heart is always there. Seema is conscious of her gifts, her own developing poetic power that she will hone and with which she will nurture citadels of hope and wonder, and is ever in gratitude to the divine, even though that's there in poem after poem, even though she has throes of frailty and must endure pain. Even as she is conscious of her sickly pain like a Keats, and her mind is in conflict between what she has done and perhaps what she must leave half done. Seema consoles herself, I quote, "Patience, Seema. Years lie ahead for goals to be set and achieved by putting peace of heart before relentless pining of self. The pining self finds its secret haven of healing in her poems. In those ways, poetry has been a therapy for her. In many ways, poetry was Seema's way of internally healing herself." Seema is committed totally, as I said, to her poetry. Colors, cities, buildings, places of every kind her father took her to, events the world over, people, relationships, gardens, intimacy, both animate and inanimate, become her abiding themes. They mold her and they come to life through her poetry. As with every genuine poet, Seema sees poetry everywhere and in everything. Even her own debilitating trauma, asthma, that must soon snatch her away from us, is an objective theme for her poetry. Though the colors of Van Gogh are her passion, it is not difficult to see that she is one with Keats, and one for whom beauty, as Mr. Jayakumar said, is truth, and truth, beauty. I can feel with Seema and become that 18-year-old again when she describes a scene in Darjeeling, which is one of her sensate, touching, and accomplished poems. I quote, "A sparkling white cottage with its green, roofed hospitality, punctuated by quiet, shadowy jawans. The promise of what is yet to come shows its part visage in such well-mastered lines further into the poem. I quote, "The sun lays gently on the abrupt lawn, falling away on multitudes of feet. Grasses and demure flowers traipsing down, little houses freckle the hillside, a quiet spiral of smoke drifting up here and there, creeping through the crisp, unbroken air." The poem has so much more than rudiments of the power, poetic setting, and almost feel of a poem like Ode to Autumn. Such is the majestic, sensuous power of Seema's poetry. Seema often rises beyond her age, making you marvel as when she wishes, again with the mind of an Annie Frank. May all such metamorphoses end only in the creation of lovely new butterflies. This is exquisite poetry, brilliant for its message of innocence, beauty, and depth of meaning that seeks, above all, universal peace and total resurgence of the brotherhood of humankind. Not only was Seema a charming poet, she was also a journalist and Bharatanatyam dancer. Tenderly gifted, beautiful, multifaceted, Seema humbles us with her abiding simplicity, virtuosity, compelling charm that draws us to her faith in nature and humanity. In fact, with these attributes, her poems even at times jolt us and surprise us. Seema Nazareth should have been much more, so much more with us. Seema was just beginning to understand her own powers as a poet when fate had its way taking her away. One marvels that, albeit non or subconsciously, Seema seemed to know what it was to become a true worthy poet, as revealed in her poem that was quoted by Madam Dada also. "If I could make a magical design," which it would be appropriate to quote here in full, as I feel that this is a poem in which the craft of poetry, as it occurred to the young talented poet, is demonstrated. I'll just read the poem. "I'm making my design on a delicate porcelain vase. In it are my dreams of wondrous things. The magic of my fantasy is the silk thread being woven into its design. My design changes with each new day. Beauty and imagination are blending in it always. In one little corner, there lay my secrets, never to be let out. The magical design goes up and down, round and round, twisting and turning, but never ending, like my imagination. My design will go on forever." This poem, I sincerely feel, should be included in poetry books for the young, so one may understand the joys and travails and triumphs of creativity. For the joy and triumph of writing, akin to making a magical design, to be etched in the hearts of poetry lovers. Seema knew creativity lay in its commitment and ardor.
I think Krishn's line is off. He's offline. His line got snapped. Maybe he could reconnect.
Feel her obsession with the making of poetry. Had only Seema been a little more with us, she would indeed have proved her heights with her commitment, gift, and dedication to poetry. It is here that posterity will poignantly miss the growth of the sensitive poet. Seema is also positive, at times a poetic philosopher, a little too unbelievable for her age and thankful. Quote, "Top? How topical. Could be the start of a topple. A chief pet could turn wild, so don't fondle it much. Relax, unwind, breathe, create." Now that sounds more like it. Elsewhere, Seema speaks her dictum, I quote, "Let not clenched teeth deter smacking lips." As Sri Jayakumar himself said, she's a poet who has lived her life to the brim in her short span of years. And as she says, "May the green palms and friends be always by my window." Seema Nazareth in her book emerges not only as an upcoming poet, She is a creative leader, a lover of earth and of all creatures great and small. And as she herself says, is a quester for the balm of beauty in all its forms. Her aim in life, in her own poignant words, is to make a mark before I die. This has been quoted earlier also. And that's something that troubles our minds to think, how for one aware of our powers as a
There is bandwidth problem. So
Maybe he will try to reconnect. Yeah, he
Yeah.
has.
Yeah.
He has.
But Seema is aware, though not at a conscious level, that she must leave her pen half done when she contemplates her mind and writes, I dream of making a mark before I die. Perhaps my mark will be only in the hearts of others, but what better place to be? Yes, indeed, Seema is in the hearts of all lovers of her poetry. For this reason, for the charismatic gentle leader that she is, who has Martin Luther King Jr. as her mentor, and with a poetry that moves us so, Seema and her work that exude qualities of goodness, positivity, and endurance, poetic glitter, and hope in a challenging world, should be an inspiration to every new generation. Her voice should be heard and listened to, just as we seek inspiration from the likes of Anne Frank or a Grace Darling. In spite of odds in her life, as her poetry reveals, Seema was a precious dynamism to her end and an inspiration to all around her. To those who read her poems, Seema will always be exceptional and special. I have, in my experience with Poetry Chain, come across 100 young poets her age. But I feel that Seema's poetry and maturity of poetic intellect, encompassing the creativity of the soul and the philosophy of the senses, while hiding her own despair, is far beyond her age, and that her poetry is its steadfast manifestation. As I close the book of poems, I feel sad for us all, that this beautiful, almost ethereal flower within the bud was not allowed its complete blossom. But no, as Seema said in her tribute to Martin Luther King Jr., that somewhere in the annals of our poetic literature, the poet Seema will endure, and I quote her own words, with a spirit still alive like undying fire. I thank the literary organizers, the India International Center, and Sri Pascal Nazareth ji in particular, for giving me this mental connect with the poet Seema, without whom my poetic journey would have remained incomplete. And with my daughterly love for Seema Nazareth, close my words with these lines of poetry by Cooper. God moves in a mysterious way, his wonders to perform. He plants his footsteps in the sea and rides upon the storm. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gopikrishnan, for your fairly elaborate exposition on Seema's poetry. Now, I think we come to the close of the program. Usha, would you like to take these questions and answers before we ask Ambassador Pascal to talk?
There are mostly comments. Actually, the first is by Amit. He says, please read a few of her poems instead of just presenting an analysis or review. And there's a namaskar from Japan for Ambassador Nazareth. And there's the third question is by T.M. Hoffman. He says, is the collection of Seema's poems available perhaps online? And the last question is again by Mr. Tim Hoffman. He says, on the IIC auditorium stage, we have been privileged to sing both Indian and Japanese poetry in Hindustani classical forms and styles with instruments of both. A few women since 1996 in Bangalore, indebted to Ambassador Nazareth, Indo-Japanese Music Exchange Association.
Would Ambassador Pascal Nazareth would like to react to them, because most of them are personal observations. Should we?
To...
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, please.
Ambassador Shyam Saran, Mr. Jay Kumar, Professor Radha Chakravarti, Dr. Gopi Krishna Kuttur. I am so deeply moved to hear all that you have had to say. I'm really close to tears. Seema was, as all of you have mentioned, was a very special child. She was the last in our family. And she was really the most talented. She excelled in her studies. She painted with pastel painting. She wrote a diary in the form of poems. She was a trained Bharatanatyam dancer. So she was special in very many ways, but she was also special in another way. She is the only one of our three children who was born in India. And I think this, to me, India, she's deeply rooted in India, including in its spirituality. Now, when we lost Seema, she was our last child. She was much loved, both by me, my wife, her elder sister and brother. That when she passed away, it was the most devastating shock and trauma that we have ever suffered. Now, my wife and I told ourselves that why the Almighty has done this to us, I don't know, and there is no way we can find out that despite all our Christian piety and all the good works that we did, that this has befallen us. So anyway, we decided that rather than question why this has happened to us, the one thing that we could do is to keep Seema's memory alive. We said we can't bring her back to life, at least we can keep her memory alive. It was such a shock to us because we had looked forward to a wedding in the family. Instead of that, we got a funeral. I can't think of any pain more excruciating than that, to have to see your child being buried before your eyes. So this is what we decided, and that is what we both, and I particularly, set out to do. The first thing I did was to set up a scholarship in her name in the Jesus and Mary College, where she had graduated and got her degree in BA economics, BA honors, economics honors. The next thing we did was to set up an award in her name in Business Standard, since she was working for Business Standard. That annual award is called the Business Standard Seema Nazareth Award for Young Journalists. Only journalists up to the age of 30 can qualify for this. The first award was given in the year 2000 on what was Seema's 25th birthday. It was given in Rashtrapati Bhavan by the then President of India, K.R. Narayanan, who had met her when he had visited New York, and he knew her, and he spoke really so warmly about her. Since that time, every year, this award has been given by some VVIP. It has been given by a former vice president in office, my colleague Hamid Ansari. It was given by a former prime minister, I.K. Gujral, by two former chief justices, M.N. Venkatachalaya, Pathak, and a number of others, including, amazingly, Vladimir Tolstoy, a great-grandson of Leo Tolstoy, whom I knew on the Gandhian circuit, and he had come to India. So I asked him whether he would do it. He said yes, with great pleasure. The other thing that we did was to set up a scholarship in her name for girl students. It's called the Seema Nazareth Endowment for Girl Children. So every year we have been giving scholarships to poor but deserving children who are hardworking. They all need to be first-class students in order to get the scholarship. And I'm glad to say that over these last 20 years, some of these students have done very well. Some of the scholars have done very, very well for themselves. One works for Ernst & Young. Premji University as an assistant professor in the Department of Pedagogy. Now the in all these ways, we are painstaking. The task for me was to collate all Seema's poems, which I found among her papers. Some of them initially were on separate pieces of paper. Others were in a diary. They were not written every day, but over a period of time, she had written. I found 72 of them. Maybe there are others which I haven't found. But these are 72. All of you have stated, I myself, I agree with you, and I believe each of them, in fact, is a gem. My favorite ones among them, however, are the first one, why did God create me? And to me, it is a measure of how fundamental thinking, a question which each of us should be asking, why has God created me? And she has answered this herself. She says, God has created me to put me on this earth to make others happy. It reminded me so much of what His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, you want to be happy, make others happy. But then she goes on to say that God need not have created me. He wanted to. That what makes me feel so special. I find this really so profound, as Ambassador Shyam Saran said, used the word profound. And I see this a lot in her poetry. And since she was born in India and there is this deep spirituality in her, she was certainly the most spiritual of all my children, not religious so much as spiritual. The Almighty was always close to her. Maybe some of this she might have got from me, because I often describe myself as a Christian Advaitin. To me, Advaita is the only thing that makes sense, that God, the creator, is not an old man with a beard sitting high up on a throne in the sky like a lot of Christian art shows him. He is the Mahashakti, the supreme energy which pervades the whole universe, and everything that one sees, whether it's the star that shines, a bird that sings, a child that is born, or a flower that blooms, is this creative energy which is around us. Our heart wouldn't beat, our lungs wouldn't breathe if there was this supreme energy which was not all the time keeping it alive. And this energy can be withdrawn at any time. And when this is done, of course, we are as dead as a donate. This maybe to some extent, Seema might have got from me also, but she was deeply spiritual. And you see this in a poem. You know, she's talking about eternity. She's talking about nature, its beauty. And her creative imagination for me is amazing. And I'm so glad to hear all that you all have said about her. I'm deeply, deeply grateful. I'm deeply grateful to Ambassador Shyam Saran and IIC for having organized this webinar, to Mr. Jai Kumar, former Chief Secretary of Kerala and the President of the Poetry Society of India. It is a great honor for me that both IIC and the Poetry Society should jointly present this webinar. They have two very distinguished scholars, a literary critic, and a poet, and a renowned poet, and all the things, the wonderful, heartwarming things that you all have said. I must also say that of all my three children, Seema was most like my, will you come a bit closer, was most like my wife. She looked, come a bit closer, can you see? Yeah, one minute.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. And she, like her, she was always very quiet and thoughtful. There were read a lot, more than certainly any of my other children, and was deeply loving. So it was really an effort of love to get this book published. It took a lot of effort to find all the poems, to get them printed, to collate them, to get them printed, to match them with photographs related to them, taken during her lifetime. Some of which we didn't have photos. Konarak, the publishers, to whom I'm deeply, deeply grateful for publishing this book, because when I decided to publish it, and I did it only after a friend of mine, a Facebook friend of mine based in Toronto, who I found was always posting poems on her Facebook page of well-known and little-known poets. I decided to write to her, to first send her a friend request, which fortunately she accepted. And then I sent her Seema's poems for an assessment, and she was so full of praise for them. And then she herself began to publish them. And I found from the response received, really, I felt confident that it was not only me, but a whole lot of others thought it was of high quality. So I then wrote to my friend KPR Nair of Konarak Publisher, and he first said, he initially said, Master Nazareth, poetry genre are not part of our portfolio. But he got back and he said, well, as a special case, we will publish it for you. And I'm deeply grateful to him. And his team, Jija Joy and Ranjana Narayan, who edited them, arranged them, and also helped in getting appropriate photos from the web. And of course, Misha Oberoi, who designed this book, which I think the cover is really stunning. And she's got just the right sort of smile, that angelic smile of Seema. And it was also her idea that in the initial pages, she has strewn rose petals in it. And I think it gives such an amazingly warm and heartwarming feeling. And I'm really deeply grateful to Konarak and all these three people. My book on Gandhi's outstanding leadership, came out in 12 Indian and 23 foreign languages. So I've dealt with editors all over the world. And I can say without hesitation that Konarak is the best of them all, and the easiest to deal with, and the most professional of them all. And as far as designing is concerned, well, there is no one else I've come across who can hold a candle to them. I'm deeply grateful to them. Now, about the question about whether the book is available, we made just a limited number of hard copies, 300 of them only. About half of them were distributed as gifts to friends, family members, and others who attended our 60th wedding anniversary on September the 1st. Isabel and I have been married for 60 years. And it was on this occasion that Justice M.N. Venkatachalaya, who also knew Seema, who released that book in Bangalore on September the 1st. To bring out this book, therefore, took a lot of time, almost 2.5 years. But I'm glad that I put this effort. As Mr. Jayakumar said, it shows the love of a father, but it also shows, it's in a way a vindication of what my wife and I had decided, that we will do something to keep her memory alive. And I believe that maybe more than all the other things that I've done and I've mentioned, this book maybe will last longer over a period of time. And it's also like a photo bio of her. So I feel happy and very, very deeply grateful to all of you who have participated in today's event, to Beena Vijay Lakshmi of Toronto, who helped to assess the book, and to Konarak Publishers for publisher. Now, so there were a limited number of copies. Some of them, the hard copies, I think are very few. They are still available on Amazon India and on Flipkart. But what is available, and we, since many of our friends, our friends are abroad, it's available in the Kindle form worldwide from Amazon.com. Those copies, of course, are unlimited. That is what I want to say. Is that, I wonder whether I have anything more to add. So once again, I also have to say a big thank you to all those, and there are so many of them, who sent pre-publication blurbs. And they are really such wonderfully, beautifully written blurbs. Maybe I just read out just one or two of them to you. The first one from Namita Gokhale, author and co-director of the Jaipur Literature Festival. Seema left the world tragically young. These poignant poems are irradiated with tenderness and joy, curiosity and empathy, as well as a steadfast propensity for truth. Now, Lily Michailidis is the author and founder director of the International Festival of Young Poets at Nicosia, Cyprus. In Seema's poems, I saw exotic new worlds steeped with love, curiosity, and positivity about life and nature. With her 72 poems, she has indeed made a mark, which will be an enduring memorial for a short but fragrant life. One heartwarming comment I got just this morning was from our former Foreign Secretary, much revered, Mr. Krishna Rasgotra. He has written, "Dear Alan, as I'm presently afflicted with a spell of bad cold and cough, I am unable to attend today's webinar. My few words about Seema's poetry are attached. In Seema's Introspections book of poems, what impressed me most is the spectrum of her imagination and her sensitivity to the panorama of daily life. There is a moving meditational quality in some of the poems, her controlled expression of emotions and her sensitive use of words reveal the delicacy and depth of her sensibility. Her early death is a great loss to India's English literature." I thank you all so much, and I apologize if I've exceeded the 10-minute time allotted to me. Many, many thanks. I love you all.
So shall we wind up? And Usha Munshi, would you like to talk something? Say something?
No, just there are a few more comments, and which says that who is the publisher, and Ambassador Nazareth has already spoken, Kunar. And what is the cost? I think it's priceless. So they have to actually look for this online, and also
the publisher I mentioned is Konak.
Yes.
Yeah, who are, I think, very well known.
Yeah.
So shall we?
Yeah. Thank you very much to all the distinguished panelists, and it was wonderful to listen to the poems of such a young, budding, and vibrant poet, and whom we lived today. We celebrated her, and we lived her through this program, and we'll continue to live her through her poems. Thank you very much for such.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Pascal Nazareth.
Now, had she?
Okay.
No, I hope you get a copy of all their talks because really.
I